let's start with the disclaimer first. Hello everyone. First of all, it will be probably a long video, at least longer than 5 minutes, I hope. So please take some paper to take notes. If you want, you can grab your favorite beverage. If you want to get some fun, you can play some music on the background, but please make it a bit lower so you can hear me. Let's get started. So now we can jump to the story point estimate and estimations, why it is needed. What is the purpose of the estimation? To be able to plan our work for 2-3 weeks, or let's call it a sprint, to be able to predict our output within this period of time. So for example, when we go to a restaurant or we go to a cafe, usually we have this estimation time, how many minutes shall we wait for our order, let's say. The same with software development quite often. A customer, client, stakeholders, they want to receive a feature usually as fast as possible. So we might have an abstract stakeholder which is waiting for define an interface for data. And to be able to answer on the question, when shall we expect this feature to be done, we need to estimate amount of work. We need to estimate the complexity of this feature. Not like how fast can I do that, but the amount of work needed. So for example, it's something similar to a distance from one point to another. So to be able to guess amount of time needed to reach a place from point A to point B, it is great to know the distance. It is a tricky part of the estimation because it is basically our best guess. Our goal here is to try to understand the task, what should be done, and then try to guess the complexity of this task. We know our capabilities, we know our abilities, and based on our information about ourselves, we can judge how difficult for us to implement this task. And then based on our knowledge and based on our calculations, we can estimate how long will it take to perform such a story or such a task. And of course, this data will be not precise, definitely, because we cannot foresee sometimes problems or hidden stones under the water. So it could be just a short walk on the park, I would say sometimes, but sometimes it might be creating a space elevator to another planet when we need to calculate so many trajectories and possibilities that sometimes it's even impossible to do. But the goal is to estimate the complexity of the story and or split it into several stories based on the context and scope to be able to estimate it better, and then do kind of retrospective view backwards and see what kind of stories we have performed and how hard was it to perform them. So we can approximate the complexity of the stories for the future, if I can say so. Looking at the past and how hard was some kind of stories for us, we're trying to predict the complexity of the stories in the future. To be able to answer to stakeholders, to clients, to investors, how much work needed to achieve specific goal or to get some functionality. In other words, we kind of trying to say to a customer that their order will be done within hours, days, months, years, centuries. How to estimate the story point or task to work on? You might think about working hours and story points. The main difference between working hours and story points is that working hours is something real. So for example, we have a sub-story, define an interface in Draw.io. Assume that we have a group of people and we need to plan or estimate the amount of work for this. Some developers might say, yeah, I will define an interface within a couple hours, so you can write 4 working hours. But then we have some developers who are not comfortable, maybe less experienced, that's absolutely fine. They can say, oh, I will need at least 2 days to define an interface because I need to gather information from different people first, maybe discuss it with architect. The working hours for me will be 2 days. We are estimating the speed of execution. But with story points, we kind of estimate the complexity of work. Under complexity, we mean how difficult to define an interface. And then we can say that to define an interface, it will take maybe 2-3 story points. Assume that we all are living in this abstract building and it is our workplace. So when we're talking about working hours, we will need to estimate how long it will take for us to reach from point A to point B. So some of you might use cars and it will take for you 20 minutes. Some of you might go by walk and it will take, let's say, 2 hours. Some of you might take a bicycle and it will take for you up to 1 hour, for example. And it means that we all will use different means how to reach that place. And it means that we will have all different estimations. But if we will talk about the distance, for example, can you visually guess how far is the workplace? Then we will try to estimate kind of the same value. So, for example, all of us will look at the workplace and will say 20 kilometers, for example. And we will talk about something common. The same with distance too. Quite commonly, people are using story points, and usually the first half year of starting a project, we estimate the complexity based on our experience or our mood and wishes, and we can estimate it less. Or if we are more pessimistic, I would say, then we can estimate more story points that it is actually is. And then these values are not trustworthy. But the most important is for Scrum Masters probably and for the developers is to observe and then re-estimate the story points of work done. Because after some period of time, you will find the kind of trend that specific amount of work, which is called distance 1, takes for you around 2-3 story points. And if it is something bigger, then you will need distance 2 and it is 5-8 story points. So then you will feel how many story points can you personally perform during the sprint, or how many story points as a team you can perform during the sprint. And then we come to management estimation. The problem with story points for you as a team, if we are talking about agile, is to take amount of work that you can done during the sprint. And if you have leftovers, then you will put it in the next sprint, of course, and you will take less task to do. But for some managers who are looking at statistics and not at the distance, but for the numbers, people might have management estimations. And it means something like, there is the distance 1, but to look better, for this sprint, it will be distance 2. Or we have distance 2, we have 8 story points, but we will split the story into 2 parts, and we will have 3 story points in the first sprint and 5 story points on the next sprint. For these nice statistics for the management level that our team is performing fine. And then it is a bit shaky, because many developers don't like to split tasks into 3, into 4, into 5 elements. They would like to work on one task and report how's the status. But from the management perspective, what they see that there is, let me open it here on the timeline. We have an epic during the 3 weeks, for example. And it's already past half of the month and no work done. What is happening? It's because the hard complexity, but we want to see the results. We want to see that this epic is done already. And then we come up with management estimation when we are creating sometimes falsely needed stories just to make sure that we have some performance on graphics. And unfortunately, it is part of the reality that sometimes managers or some other people in this chain of safe, they would like to see your performance and they would like to see some story points done during the sprint. And you know what is happening quite often? That you are somewhere here close to the end, but you are waiting for the final review, or you are waiting for impediments, you are waiting for dependencies needed before it will be merged. And you have, for example, 3 or 4 stories here in the review state waiting for something. And people are pushing you with phrases, yeah, but you know, we need to close story points within this sprint. And it is quite bad. Please take it as a pinch of salt. As I said before, it is controversial video, so oof, I am waiting for a comment section. As you may notice, we can write here any number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the question is how to estimate it. And here I would say there is an approach which is quite widely used, and it is use the Fibonacci sequence to estimate the story points. Probably you know these Fibonacci numbers. So it means, for example, estimation of story points up to 8 included can be done within one sprint as a one story. If you estimate the complexity of the story as 13 and more, it means that this story should be splitted into 2. And when you estimate the complexity of the stories, it is a bit easier to go between 5 and 8, because you might say, I will estimate it as 6, and then it is close to 5, but not to the 8. There is one thing which is called the Scrum poker. The idea of a Scrum poker is that every team member in a team, when they are estimating the complexity of the story, they took a card and then show it to each other. And then there is a calculation to get the average number of the complexity. And then this number will be compared to the Fibonacci sequence. That's quite useful on the paper. The most problematic part is that quite often on the sprint planning, 2 or 3 people within the group are talking and everyone else is just silent. And in that case, you have wrong estimations, because quite often you have one, can I say, with all due respect, talkative person that's saying, oh, this story is quite easy. And then everyone got false feeling that this story is easy. Or we have one person who is quite pessimistic and said that this story will require a lot of work. And then everyone will have this false feeling that that story is complicated, maybe more complicated than they were imagined. Not every time planning poker is used. Sometimes people are discussing complexity, and it is good if everyone is involved. It is not needed to personally, interrogate everyone about the feelings behind the story. Why did you decide to use number 9 here? But just to ask a number. Now we can go to sprints, I guess. Under sprints, we are talking about the period of time. Usually it is 2-3 weeks. The reason of 2-3 weeks, because on the beginning of sprint, usually you have a sprint planning, and then you have sprint retrospective, sprint review, and also you might have backlog refinement within the sprint. And usually it means that you have 5 working days and 2 or 3 of them are occupied by meetings, so you don't have too much time work on the actual items. 2 or 3 week sprint, usually. Sprints are used in Agile or Scrum. Quite often you have several teams working in the same sprints, and then in the end of the sprints you have a common meetings where you're presenting the results and etc. But it is related to Agile and Scrum, but I'm using the Kanban board. And Kanban works in a little bit different way. We don't have sprints. We have basically a board with list of stories to work on. And it means that we go to board and we just need to create here, firstly, on the planning, list of items to work on, and then move all of them to done. That's an idea. We don't have sprints. We just create work items to work on, and then we make it finish. That's basically it. Talking about the sprints and estimations, now it is time to discuss one thing which is called dependencies. So, for example, in our task related to the define an interface for data, we have two child issues. The one is define an interface and second one is duplicate an interface. And based on the title, I apologize for lack of the description here. We can write it later when we will probably plan our work. But here we can link issue, and you can see here is blocked by or blocks. And here we can specify define an interface in draw.io and link it. So now if we go back to this issue number 6, you will see that it automatically creates a link to blocks. And it is needed in the case if you are filtering stories in the backlog, which are open to do. So you can add a filter that, for example, there is no blockers. Or if one of your colleagues opened the board and then, oh, I would like to grab this story to work on, or I would like to move this story here. Then you can open the board and see, wait a second, I have one story missing, for example, or I have one which is blocked. So it helps your team members to see what is blocked by and why. So that please use it actively. If you feel that something is blocking you, then create a story and make it, because during the backlog refinement, quite often you go through the issues and see, oh, I have this one blocked by something, and then you go there and maybe you need to escalate a problem to higher level and etc. So please use actively dependencies and linked issues if needed. Talking about the dependencies, you might see two things. The first one, it is a flag and also a label. And I would say these two options, add flag and add label, is totally depending on the company. Sometimes they are using one of them, sometimes use both of them, or you can discuss maybe you will use it within the team. For example, one of the Scrum Masters, which I had a honor to work with, the Scrum Master was using label to indicate case of ending a sprint when we feel that we have, for example, here 30 stories on board and they are in the review. The Scrum Master could mark as a flag stories which will be prolonged to the next sprint, because sometimes you might wait for the review 1 hour and make it done. But sometimes you might get a review and then review and then review, and then it will be for the next sprint for 3-4 days more. And in that case, the Scrum Master just flagged it. It is for the comfort. It is totally depending on a team and a company and the culture. I think that I will stop here. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.